Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has enjoyed a clear numerical advantage in the skies. Vladimir Putin's forces have fielded larger numbers of combat aircraft across almost every category, including many newer and more sophisticated jets. That superiority has given Russia the upper hand in the air, especially along the front lines, where for most of 2025 Su-34s have been raining down thousands of FAB glide bombs, while Ukraine has had only a limited number of land-based air defense systems capable of countering them. That situation, however, may be on the verge of changing fundamentally because of a single document. A pending agreement between Ukraine and Sweden has the potential to reshape the entire course of the war. This is not a routine piece of paperwork. It is a letter of intent signed on October 22, 2025 by Sweden and Ukraine that envisions Kyiv receiving between 100 and 150 Gripen E series fighter jets, an aircraft purpose-built to exploit Ukraine's unique geography and infrastructure. According to Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, such a transfer would give Ukraine a truly serious air force. Choosing the Gripen is a shrewd move for a country fighting a war in which neither side's air arm has been particularly successful or decisive. In past conflicts like the war in Iraq, the campaigns in the Balkans, or Israel's wars against Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, air power has been a dominant factor. By contrast, the Ukrainian and Russian air forces have played a much more limited role in this war. A major reason is the relatively low overall quality and capability of both air forces compared with, for example, the formidable array of F-35 Lightning II, F-22 Raptor, F-18 Super Hornet, and heavy bomber fleets operated by the United States. Another key factor is the density and effectiveness of both sides' layered air defense systems, which have made commanders on both sides extremely cautious about sending high-value aircraft close to the front, where the risk of being shot down is very high. Before the full-scale invasion, Russia possessed an air force of roughly 900 fourth-generation and more advanced aircraft. That total included around 14 fifth-generation Su-57s, approximately 365 Su-35s, Su-27s, and Su-30s combined, and about 134 Su-34s. By the end of 2024, Russia had lost at least 130 fixed-wing aircraft and 146 helicopters, equating to almost one-third of its original fleet. Ukraine's situation has been even more severe. Prior to the invasion, Ukraine operated only about 120 combat-ready fighter aircraft, almost all of them aging Soviet designs like the MiG-29 Fulcrum, Su-24 Fencer, Su-25 Frogfoot, and Su-27 Flanker. Ukraine did manage to refurbish a number of older, retired jets and return them to service, but by late 2024, at least 100 Ukrainian aircraft had been confirmed destroyed, including 89 fighters. That implies that perhaps only a dozen or two of Ukraine's original fighter jets remain in operation. In theory, Russia's aviation industry, which is believed to be capable of producing somewhere between 22 and 49 new fighters per year, should be able to replace most of its losses among Su-30s, Su-35s, and Su-34s. Ukraine, despite its ingenuity and improvisation, simply does not possess anything like that level of aeronautical manufacturing capacity. Announcements in 2024 that Ukraine would receive United States-built F-16s and French Mirage 2000F fighters raised hopes that Ukraine's air force might finally gain enough capability to seriously challenge Russian air power. Yet, although exact numbers are still not public, only a small portion of those promised aircraft have actually arrived. And even once all deliveries are complete, Ukraine's fleet will still be substantially smaller than Russia's. As of November 2025, Ukraine is believed to have received at least 7 F-16s, of which at least 3 have already been lost. Altogether, about 85 F-16s have been pledged to Ukraine for combat use, primarily by the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and Norway. France has committed around 20 Mirage 2000F jets, with the first 3 thought to have already been delivered. A full contingent of these aircraft could significantly improve Ukraine's ability to control its airspace, but for now, they are not being used aggressively on the front lines or for regular air-to-air combat with Russian fighters. The simple reality is that there are still not enough of them. Instead, these Western fighters are being used mainly in a defensive role, stationed farther from the front and focused on shooting down Russian cruise missiles and Garand-type drones that relentlessly bombard Ukrainian cities and civilian infrastructure at night. A major obstacle to bringing more of Ukraine's remaining aircraft into active combat is the vulnerability of its primary air bases. Ukraine has at least 20 air bases, including facilities in or near Artsy, Chernihiv, Chortkiv, Lutsk, Melitopol, Mirhorod, Nizhin, Oktyrka, Ovruch, Ozerny, Priluki, Starokostiantiniv, Strei, and Volga Krusha, along with the Dnipro and Kyiv-Zuliani international airports. Like much of Ukraine's air fleet, most of these airfields are Soviet-era installations. Even though many have been substantially upgraded since Ukraine gained independence in 1991, Russian planners know their locations and structural weaknesses in detail. As a result, Russia has regularly attacked these bases with missiles and drones, making them very dangerous places to park expensive, irreplaceable jets. Ukraine's response has been to disperse its fighters across a wide network of smaller airfields and improvised strips that are often short, rough, and far from ideal. This poses particular challenges for Ukraine's F-16s and Mirage 2000Fs, which demand longer and better maintained runways than Ukraine's older but more rugged Soviet-designed aircraft. The F-16 in particular is extremely sensitive to runway conditions. Its large engine intake, positioned low under the fuselage, and its relatively delicate landing gear mean it requires clean, well-maintained surfaces. Unlike many Soviet designs, it lacks any anti-foreign object debris protection, and its wide, low intake effectively vacuums up loose dirt, stones, and debris. Ukrainian units do operate F-16s from dispersed airstrips, but they must do so with great caution, relying on specially assembled mobile teams carrying all the equipment needed to safely launch and recover such a fragile aircraft on a dirty runway. The problem is that any large-scale effort to upgrade Ukraine's runways to make them fully suitable for F-16s would be immediately visible to Russian satellites and human intelligence sources, instantly turning those locations into high-priority targets. As air warfare analyst Justin Bronk of the Royal United Services Institute in the United Kingdom has explained, bringing Ukraine's old Soviet pattern runways up to a standard where F-16s could operate without a high risk of foreign object debris causing engine damage would require extensive resurfacing and possibly lengthening of runways. All of that work would be highly visible from space and to Russian agents on the ground. The F-16 typically requires between about 1,650 and 2,600 feet of runway, depending on its payload, which automatically limits the number of Ukrainian airfields from which it can safely operate. The Mirage 2000 also needs a minimum takeoff run of around 1,650 feet at sea level when carrying 2 infrared-guided missiles, making many Ukrainian strips unsuitable, although the French jet can tolerate somewhat rougher and shorter runways than the F-16. That makes the Mirage a better fit for Ukraine's uneven infrastructure, but still far from ideal. All of this helps explain why basing the reconstruction of Ukraine's Air Force on the Swedish Gripen E series is such a clever strategic choice. There is also a broader geopolitical reason why the Gripen is a smart foundation for a long-term aviation partnership. As the United States signals a gradual pullback from direct military support to Ukraine, responsibility for sustaining Kyiv's defense is shifting decisively to Europe. European members of NATO have pledged to raise their defense spending from around 2% of gross domestic product to 5% by 2035. In doing so, they have indicated that they intend to use the opportunity to expand their own defense industries rather than relying as heavily on United States-made weapons as they have for decades. It therefore makes sense for Ukraine to cultivate long-term relationships with the defense sectors of the European countries that will be providing most of its support in the future. The central reason the Gripen is such a good fit for Ukraine, however, is that it was purpose-designed to operate from shorter, rougher runways, and to counter Soviet and Russian air warfare doctrine. Sweden began designing the Gripen in the 1980s specifically to ensure that its air force could survive Soviet attacks on traditional air bases. The concept was that the jets would operate from dispersed highway strips scattered across the country, instead of from a few large, spotless airfields that would be obvious targets at the start of any war, much as Russian bombers have targeted Ukrainian air bases. A similar logic lies behind the design of Ukraine's Soviet-era MiG-29s, which were also engineered to function from relatively short, rough runways or straight sections of roadway when necessary. A MiG-29 can take off from a runway of roughly 2,000 feet even when fully armed and fueled. When the aircraft lands, its reinforced landing gear absorbs the impact and special doors automatically close over its large air intakes, while additional intake openings on top of the fuselage swing open. This clever system prevents debris, like rocks, from being sucked into the engines when operating from unpaved or dirty surfaces. Ukraine's Su-24 bombers, Su-25 attack jets, and Su-27 interceptors are also equipped with similar anti-foreign object debris features. The Gripen requires a runway length similar to that of the Mirage, around 1,650 feet, thanks to its canard foreplanes, which also act as powerful aerodynamic brakes. Although it lacks the MiG's closing intake doors, it sits high on relatively tall landing gear, which keeps the intakes further from the ground and reduces the risk of debris ingestion. These characteristics make the Gripen exceptionally well suited to the highly mobile, dispersed basing system that Ukraine has been forced to adopt. Sweden's entire concept was formalized in its BAS-90 system, a network of highway strips, concealed fuel caches, and minimal fixed infrastructure designed to ensure that the Air Force could keep flying even if conventional bases were destroyed by Soviet bombers. Swedish planners imagined teams of mechanics working out of trucks, while Gripens took off and landed on short stretches of public road between refueling operations. The Cold War confrontation they anticipated never happened, but their concept may now find its real-world application in Ukraine. Beyond its basing flexibility, the Gripen is an impressively capable and robust platform overall. The JS-39 Gripen E, its full designation, is considered a so-called 4++ generation fighter with enhanced stealth features and improved survivability. It is a single-seat, multi-role aircraft designed to handle air-to-air combat, air-to-ground strikes, and reconnaissance missions. It offers high operational flexibility, quick turnaround times between sorties, and relatively low operating costs, all of which align very well with Ukraine's needs. The Gripen E is powered by a single General Electric F-1414GE39E turbofan engine that produces roughly 98 kilonewtons of thrust, giving the jet an excellent thrust-to-weight ratio and enabling it to supercruise, that is, to fly faster than Mach 1, or roughly 775 miles per hour, equivalent to about 1,250 kilometers per hour, without engaging afterburners. Its maximum speed is around Mach 2, or about 1,535 miles per hour, approximately 2,470 kilometers per hour, at high altitude. In terms of size, the Gripen E is just under 50 feet, roughly 15 meters in length, with a wingspan of about 28.2 feet, roughly 8.5 meters, and a maximum takeoff weight of 36,375 pounds, or around 16,500 kilograms. Its combat radius is about 930 miles, roughly 1,500 kilometers, thanks to increased internal fuel capacity, made possible by moving the landing gear into the inner wings. With external tanks, its ferry range can be extended to roughly 2,485 miles, or about 4,000 kilometers. Compared with the F-16 and Mirage 2000F, the Gripen is widely regarded as easier and quicker to maintain. In terms of armament, the Gripen E features 10 external hardpoints that can carry up to 15,800 pounds of weapons, roughly 7,200 kilograms. It can be equipped with a wide range of advanced air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions, including the Meteor Beyond Visual Range missile, which can reach speeds of about Mach 4, roughly 3,069 miles per hour, or around 4,940 kilometers per hour, and has a range of about 186 miles, approximately 300 kilometers. It can also carry familiar Western weapons like the AIM-120 AMRAAM and AIM-9 Sidewinder, which are also part of Ukraine's F-16 arsenal. In addition, the Gripen can deploy the Iris-T short-range infrared-guided missile with a top speed of around Mach 3, roughly 2,300 miles per hour, or about 3,700 kilometers per hour, and a range of up to 25 miles, about 40 kilometers, along with a 27mm Mauser